How's it going, you guys? So in this video I wanted to discuss some of the hormonal dangers of a ketogenic metabolism. Okay, so I have seen a lot of comments from people who simply do not understand hormonal health. They don't understand cortisol, they don't understand thyroid hormone, and they don't understand what happens when your body is put into a starvation state, meaning caloric restriction. Simply removing carbohydrates from the diet does not equal a starvation state. So here's the thing. So let's break it down hormone by hormone, okay? So the most common one that people talk about is thyroid hormone. So people try to say that your body requires carbohydrates in order to, create active thyroid hormone. Well, what they don't understand is that your body actually creates glucose from body fat stores and dietary fatty acids as a primary source for gluconeogenesis. So, free fatty acids and the glycerol backbone of triglycerides, your body actually can convert into glycogen and glucose. And secondarily, it'll convert amino acids like alanine, but typically that's only after you've lost so much body fat that you're on the verge of death. So, people who are eating a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, uh, they will typically convert free fatty acids into glucose and glycogen. Okay. And their body won't be breaking down muscle tissue like a lot of people say, not unless they're in an extremely calorically deprived state. And so, whatever needs the body has to create thyroid hormone from glucose, it will fulfill through gluconeogenesis. It is a demand driven process, meaning just eating protein beyond a certain point is not going to automatically convert amino acids into glucose. It's not like eating carbs. Your body will only create glucose to fulfill any needs it has. So that means to create thyroid hormone, to fuel brain function. And then, some people ask me, oh, what about hair growth? I heard that your body needs carbs to fuel hair growth. Well, it can convert free fatty acids into glucose to fulfill that need. Someone told me that they don't want to go keto because they have dry eyes, and Dave Asprey said that your body needs carbs to because tears are made out of glucose or something stupid like that. Okay, well, guess what? Gluconeogenesis will fulfill that demand, and it's highly efficient, contrary to what a lot of people say. So, mechanistically speaking, your body can create whatever glucose it needs to create active thyroid hormone. But of course, it can take some time for somebody to actually become efficient at switching over to fatty acid conversion from, years of feeding themselves dietary carbohydrates. Now, what about the people who actually report lower thyroid hormone on keto diets? Okay, so there have been people who have came out who have fixed this problem without adding carbs back into their diet. And what they did is they realized that they've been in a calorically starved state for a long time. Typically, anybody who restricts calories below their basic metabolic rate for too long, your body will downregulate thyroid hormone in an attempt to lower energy expenditure. So that if you're not eating enough calories, your body lowers thyroid so to survive, basically, so it doesn't have to start breaking down body tissue. So lower thyroid means lower energy expenditure, and lower energy expenditure typically will result in lower energy, feeling lethargic, and maintaining weight or not losing weight, right? So there was actually a study done by Dr. Tim Noakes. I believe it was published in 2019. And he basically showed that so ketogenic diets do not lower thyroid hormone. unless these people are not eating enough calories. Caloric restriction, regardless of carb intake, tends to lower thyroid hormone over time. And a reoccurring theme with keto diets and carnivore diets is that, for one, so people just, they lose their hunger and they end up only eating one meal a day because they realize that they don't really need as much food anymore. Or their appetite goes away because ketones are appetite suppressing. And protein is one of the highest satiating macronutrients. Fat is the number one most satiating macronutrient. And on keto diets, it's all people are eating. And so people just literally don't feel hungry enough to eat because their appetite's being suppressed on these diets, which creates an accidental caloric deficit. And so if these people just add more fat and protein into their diet, if they just eat enough calories, they don't even need to add carbs back in, but their thyroid will start to increase over time. And their metabolic rate will increase and their thyroid hormone will go back to normal. But most people do keto diets without supplementing sodium and without eating enough protein, and they quit within the first 2 weeks, which is during the adaptation period, and they don't get their thyroid tested, but they just feel like crap because they're not doing it right and they haven't adapted yet. And then they go on YouTube and they tell people how they feel like crap on the diet and it's probably because they are in a carb deficiency. There's no such thing as a carb deficiency. It's just that, you either weren't supplementing electrolytes, you were eating enough protein, or you were still adapting. And by the way, if you want to eat carbs, you can do that and be healthy. And you could do that and lose weight. But, don't go around spreading misinformation without lab tests, because then you're just like Frank Tufano, basically. So there's that. The thyroid hormone idea is a misunderstanding of thermogenesis, essentially, and adaptive thermogenesis. So then we have cortisol. Okay, so cortisol is not just it doesn't cause stress. Typically, cortisol is a hormone that is released in response to stress, and its purpose is actually reducing the stress response. So if you're excreting more cortisol, it doesn't necessarily mean that, something negative. Like when you exercise vigorously, you're breaking down your body's tissues, and then cortisol is released in response to that to lower the inflammation, reduce the reactive oxygen species, and to help to tame the damage that was done from the exercise, essentially. When you wake up in the morning, cortisol is released, and adrenaline is released on the side of that to help you get up and get motivated and get out the door. Then you have, so then the other function of cortisol is to mobilize energy for fuel. So that is something that, a lot of people don't recognize when they talk about this. But there are some people that do recognize that it's his purpose and still feel like it's a bad thing. But basically, I believe there was an intervention, there were intervention trials that were measuring other factors but included cortisol readings as well. And it's hard to find this data because it wasn't a direct measurement. It wasn't an objective of the study. It was a side measurement. But I've seen studies that showed after the first 2 weeks of a ketogenic diet or inducing ketogenesis through whatever means, cortisol levels start to go back to baseline after the first 2 weeks. And it seems like, so first of all, cortisol, its main purpose when you're doing a ketogenic diet is to mobilize fat for fuel. And keep in mind, one of the reasons why cortisol increases after exercise is also to burn fat for fuel. And your body does produce mild state of ketosis after workouts, especially during caloric restriction. Okay? And caloric restriction also increases cortisol, um, mostly because you have to mobilize fat for energy, but it's just less efficient than if you were to eat unlimited calories and lower your carbs. But there are many other ways of doing it. So the point here, though, is that cortisol's function in ketosis, it doesn't just represent, oh, you're under stress and you can't sleep. For most people, so ketosis also induces GABA. It boosts GABA production, and GABA is an anti-stress neurotransmitter. It's the body's main inhibitory neurotransmitter that typically reduces anxiety, puts people to sleep, and calms them down. And when I first started the carnivore diet back in November of 2018, I was dazzled by how amazing my sleep was. Like, for the first time, it seemed like in my life, but it's been since I was 8 years old, really. My sleep was so good that I didn't need supplements. And because I used to be more into herbs and things like holy basil to put me to sleep. But ketosis actually was allowed me to sleep deeper than ever, and I felt more energized and well rested than ever. And that's a common theme, although some people seem to have more trouble than others, probably for certain reasons. The point here is if it increases GABA, it does definitely decrease stress through that function. And by the way, that's one of the main mechanisms suggested for why ketogenic diets are effective at putting epilepsy into remission for about 50% of the patients who can, and that's based on adherence, of course. Um, so, increasing GABA, that's decreasing stress, improving sleep for many people, and improving depression and anxiety symptoms for many people. That's a very common thing as well. And again, results may vary depending on the person and their overall diet and lifestyle. Because there could be factors involved that they're not paying attention to, like electrolytes. Because if you're not getting enough sodium, then you'll have all the symptoms associated with what they call adrenal fatigue. Um, but yeah, so if you look at the entire picture and people's experiences and the studies that show, increased GABA, and you look at what GABA does, it decreases adrenaline, et cetera, and you look at, are people's cortisol levels elevated to a pathological degree in the long term, what you find is that low carb or keto diets don't just like increase your cortisol and it breaks down body tissue and your body rots away. I mean, if you look at all the people who went vegan to carnivore or began a ketogenic diet in general, they look like they're on steroids, and maybe some of them are. But I myself, so I actually had a body fat scan. I was eating 3,000 calories on a high carb diet, and I was fluffy and fat. My body fat scan showed I had 160, like I don't even remember exactly. I think it was 169 pounds of lean mass, and then 30 pounds of fat mass or something like that. So I was like 20 something percent body fat or something. And then, um, you know, a year later, after a ketogenic diet, and I had stopped doing hypertrophy work for a while. So I was eating, 3,000 calories on a high carb diet, and I had 20% body fat. Um, then a year later, I was eating 4,500 or more calories on a high fat, low carb diet, and I measured my body fat. And what I found is that my lean mass stayed the same, but I actually decreased my fat mass by over 10 pounds. And I've actually maintained around 183, 185 pounds since I started the keto carnivore diet back in November of 2018. But I have looked better and better as the time has gone on. And I'm a competitive athlete, I do powerlifting and this and that, but I never really cared too much about muscle building. So the fact that I maintain my lean mass and decrease my fat mass at the same time while eating more calories, if my cortisol was elevated so much and it was breaking down muscle tissue, then I would have lost lean mass. There would have been a clear loss of lean mass in my body fat scans, but there wasn't. So this idea that cortisol is elevated on low carb diets and it's catabolic and all this crap, I have an extremely hard time believing that. I don't think it's true. I think it's something that we're used to thinking, because we've seen it in textbooks our whole life. On my NASM certification, it was, spreading some nonsense. Saturated fat causes heart disease, they say. They say polyunsaturated fats are bad. And their questions on trans fat was just ridiculous. They said, what is a source of trans fat? Milk, margarine, what is not a source of trans fat? Milk, margarine, deep fried chicken, or I don't even remember what the question was. Oh yeah, or like vegetable oil or something like that. I think the answer was milk. The right answer was supposed to be milk, but milk actually has trans fat in it. It has CLA. It's a healthy trans fat. Anyway, we're used to being told that cortisol, or we're used to being told that we need carbs to live. We're used to being told that we need carbs for energy, that we need antioxidants, all this stuff. But when you actually understand the physiology of the body, and you break away from nutritional dogma and correlation studies, you realize that it's not necessarily true. There might be unique benefits to eating more carbs, like people who have really damaged metabolisms and hypothyroidism already. People have been calorically restricting for a long time. The best way to, heal a horribly damaged adaptive thermogenesis metabolism, someone whose resting metabolic rate is extremely low, and they plateau hard when they're doing caloric restriction. The best way to remedy that is probably to spike up the carbs, And there's actually a lot of people who have actually found out that eating way more food above their basic metabolic rate seems to increase their fat burning and break their plateau, but they have to get fat first. It's a long story, and that is very complicated. But point here is that, it doesn't wreck your hormones, okay? And we're just used to hearing bad things about calorie or carb restriction. So then there's the other hormones. So we got testosterone, right? Testosterone. So people claim that you need carbs for testosterone. So first of all, how in the hell did I lose 10 pounds of body fat and maintain the same amount of lean mass while I'm sparring hard rounds in Muay Thai, rolling hard in Jiu Jitsu, doing hard heavy bag rounds on a regular basis, and not doing any hypertrophy work? I'm eating 4,500 calories, and then also using a heart rate monitor. I found I was actually, because I was doing conditioning before and all the same things before when I was eating less calories, and I lost more body fat and maintained lean mass. If my testosterone was low, then I don't think I'd even be able to have the energy to do all that stuff. The other thing is, again, it's a calorie thing. So when people restrict calories over the long term, not only does their thyroid go down, but their sex hormones do too. People lose their period. They lose their libido. Their testosterone tanks. There was one guy, his name is Carnivore Kurt on YouTube. And he had gotten diagnosed with low testosterone. He had dangerously low T on his blood panels. Then he consulted with Paul Soldino. Paul Soldino said, hey man, you're not eating enough fat, not eating enough calories. Double your fat intake and eat more calories. So this guy, Carnivore Kurt, you could look up his YouTube video. He has test results and everything. He doubled his fat intake and he tripled, he doubled or tripled his testosterone simply by eating enough fat and calories. So that goes back to my point on thyroid hormone. Look, man, like you can eat a high carb diet or a low carb diet. It doesn't matter. If you're calorically restricting over the long term, you're going to feel like crap. You're going to feel lethargic. You're going to experience adaptive thermogenesis where your thyroid hormones tank and your sex hormones are going to go down too. But if you eat enough calories, even on a low carb diet, guess what happens to your testosterone? Your testosterone will be healthy. Guess what happens to your thyroid hormone? Your thyroid hormone will be healthy because you're not in a starvation state where your body needs to suppress thyroid to lower energy expenditure so that it doesn't start breaking down muscle tissue. Yeah. So all this dogma, like people say, oh, low carb people are like, and I'm not even a low carb person, by the way. But I'm just sharing all the knowledge that I've learned from my low carb journey. Like, there's a lot of dogma in the high carb group that is not based on evidence. It's not based on facts. And, people are like, oh, well, that's why you feel like crap on low carb. Or they'll reference these studies where, low carb diets increase your risk of dying. And then you look at the low carb group and they're eating 150 grams of carbs a day. That's like nowhere near ketogenic carbohydrate intake. Completely different metabolic effects. 20 grams or less is keto. 150 grams a day is not low carb. Not in context. Well, anyway, so eat enough salt, eat enough calories, eat enough fat, eat enough protein, and you won't have those hormonal effects that people are so scared of. So post your question and comments down below, and if you disagree with me, show me some evidence, debunk my points, and don't just use random useless comments like, oh, so you're saying that sausage is healthier than sweet potatoes? That doesn't mean anything. That question makes no sense. So productive conversation only, please. Don't waste my time.